Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Today we're going to look at some of the household things that you may think are pretty ordinary and everyday, but might have a sinister background to them. We're going to look at what's going on in the world, and we know potentially who are behind it, but how are they affecting us in many, many different ways, starting possibly with the rather unusual weather that we're having. So my guest today is Simpson. He's been on the show once or twice before, and he is back again to help me understand what we are being subjected to and how we can combat it. And I'm sure you'll enjoy it as much as I shall. Ian, welcome back to the show. Lovely to have you here.
Hello, Richard. Yeah, thanks for having me back again. Yeah, it's interesting times, isn't it? You know, you could use the catchphrase, what on earth is going on? So hopefully in these talks, you know, we're slowly working it all out. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of have a bit of a chat about everything today, rather than just focus on one particular aspect. You know, I was going to cover several things. As you know, my kind of specialist subject is the trails in the sky. We covered that extensively last time. I could go a lot deeper, but that's not really what I want to do today. I am going to touch on something in a second, you know, which could be classed as weather warfare. Now, when I started my campaign many moons ago, it was about 11 years ago now, I refused to use that term because it was a bit dramatic and people couldn't really comprehend that they could be under attack by our government or an international body, or you know what I'm saying. Everything's changed. Everything has changed, partly because of channels like you, but there's loads of people out on YouTube and TikTok who are exposing this and exposing that. And whereas once upon a time everybody would have been, oh come on, you know, oh come on, you know, now they're like, oh my God, you know. And as I'm sure I mentioned last time, you know, that thing changed everything. You know, it woke so many people up. So
Yeah.
anyway, I wanted to just kind of slightly deviate from my main thing, which is health sabotage. Well, it's kind of connected, and it's the farming thing. I know you mentioned the whole PCR thing. I just wanted to go over that. So I had a message to the farmers, which is put your farms in trust. Now, anyone who's paying attention has realized that the whole farming industry is under attack. You know, they're trying to destroy the food supply. They want to get rid of beef. They want to get rid of dairy. Okay. Now, one of the ways they're doing this is to try and bankrupt the farmers through ever decreasing prices they give them. But one of the really sneaky things they did recently, as you know, was to remove their exemption from inheritance tax. Now, what I'd say to them is, don't be a victim of the parasite class, as I call them. Learn from them. All right. This is what they do to avoid tax. All right. They put their properties in trust. Now, if you put your farm in a trust, they can't touch it. Nobody can touch it. All right. And it goes down and your family inherits it. So, you know, if their intentions are to keep it as a running business, that's it. Perfect solution. I wanted to talk about the whole badger thing as well. Now, I remember I learned, literally, I heard you say this on a program recently, and I'd only just found it out just before you did, and I'd never made the connection. And that is between the PCR tests and bovine TB. Now, I've always been quite angered by seeing all these dead badgers in the street. And, you know, we kind of know what's going on there, don't we? And they're dumping them to make it look like they've been hit by cars, but we know what's going on. But it's not really their fault. So I say that, you know, it's not badgers spreading BTB, which is bovine TB, it's DEFRA. Okay. And this is yet another method of attacking beef farmers, you know, cattle farmers. All right. Because they go around there and they do the PCR test. And as we all know, if you ramp it up to 35 cycles, you can find anything you want. So if you look at the science, there is no demonstrable link between badger culls and the incidence of bovine TB anywhere. There's like repeated studies between 2009 and 2019. They found no correlation whatsoever. There was also a study in Scotland done a few years back now. I can't remember the details of the exact date, but it was a lady who basically tracked badgers over time, and she tracked the cows, and she found that there was no, I think her words was, there was no mechanism by which it could be transferred from one to the other, because they didn't cross paths at all. Now, obviously, if they're all snuffling together on the same bit of small land, then you could kind of understand some sort of transmission, but there was nothing. They didn't cross paths at all. So DEFRA basically are creating this in the same way that they create, that the government created a whole, that scandal or panic or scam or whatever you want to call it. So that's just a couple of little points I wanted to make before I go on to the next thing, which is, sorry, this is a bit random, but
no, absolutely.
It will come together.
Yes.
So the other way they are attacking us, but not just the farming industry, but everything. So we've all seen the insane floods that are going on everywhere. So everybody knows, or most people who, most of your listeners and anyone paying attention will understand that I call it weather warfare, as I said. I think in the intro I said it, didn't I? That it's not a term I would have used 11 years ago, but I think people are ready to accept that we are under attack from our governments and international bodies, and the United Nations, and the NWO is kind of the umbrella term, isn't it? New World Order, and that's their term, by the way. It's not our term, so they call themselves that. Weather warfare. So I'm not sure if many people understand what these are, but HAARP is a high active oral. I can't remember what it's called now. Something program. There's another system called NEXRAD. I don't know if you want to pull up those pictures if you can.
Yes, let me just grab those.
Now, when you Google HAARP, you come up with HAARP is a facility in Canada for researching the ionosphere and stuff like that. But what they don't tell you, okay, so
let me just go and find I think here we go. This is the HAARP.
Right, that's a land-based HAARP system. Now, I have to caveat this with HAARP and these EMF directed energy weapons. They're not my speciality. It's not something I've delved into deeply. I just wanted to cover it because it's relevant to all the flooding and the whole idea of us being under attack.
Just for reference, you can't see it on the screen, but it says this 180 antenna HAARP array is spread across 40-acre site in Alaska.
Yeah.
So this is this one. A lot of people will reference, of course.
Yeah. So what they want you to believe is that this is just one research station, and it's just about researching the ionosphere and stuff like that. But there's loads of these things all over the world. There's secret ones on islands, and the other system you can see in these images, the ones with a big dome.
Yes.
They're a slightly different system called NEXRAD. I don't really understand NEXRAD. But it's definitely involved in some way. There are other people who specialize in this area. You might want to go try and find them, to your listeners, that is. So, but what they've done is they put HAARP on ships. So not only can they beam this stuff into the ionosphere, they can beam it into the earth. All right. And these ships have appeared off the coast of Valencia just before the massive floods. There was I think it was in Turkey. There was a big earthquake, and one of these ships was spotted in off the coast there. So what they do is they've got a few of these, and they're moving them around, and they're creating all these disasters, and it's massive rains, it's earthquakes. These things are incredibly powerful. Now, this one is tenuous, I have to say, because it's described as a power ship.
Yeah.
Okay. So we can't say 100% that this is a HAARP ship, but there are other ships like this that just basically have the land-based one with all the antenna. That's what they have all over the ship, this massive array rectangle configuration.
I mean, they do look like it's got some sort of weird.
It doesn't look like the land-based HAARP systems, but what are all those things? Now, I don't know much about mobile power generation, but it doesn't look quite right to me.
No.
But there have been other ships, which unfortunately I didn't send you the images in time. So there are other ships that look exactly like the land-based HAARP systems. So they are, without any doubt at all, HAARP ships. So they're moving these things around, and they're creating all these weather events. Okay. Now, there's several things they're doing. One seems to be attacking farmland. Okay. And I think they they rely on the fundamental spraying to create the basic cloud formations, and then they attack them with this ionosphere. And again, it's not my speciality, but I just wanted to mention it.
I mean, we kind of, I mean, just as a layman walking out into the town, or outside in your garden or what have you, we haven't seen many consecutive days of sunshine. We might be lucky and get perhaps one or two, but my father kept a diary, and I've looked at that a few months ago, and one of the things he always used to write was talk about the weather. And it's like, always it's another sunny day, or it's a what have you day. And I can't vouch it because I haven't got it here in front of me, but I do not remember, and from my own personal history, going from autumn into the winter, in which you very now rarely see the sun for any length of days. And I said this in my monologue only this morning. You remember the old crisp days where it was cold and there may be a frost or even some snow on the ground, but the sun would still be out. We've just had this thick blanket down here in Sussex, where I am, for just days and days and days. You might get a few hours of sunshine, and then you start seeing all the bloody streaks in the sky again, and it goes. So I think we can see that. And of course, gardeners know that things aren't growing.
Yeah. So I'm going to digress slightly. What I think is going on with it, I'm not going to go into the examples of the Mandela effect, but most of your listeners will understand what that means. So they're trying to gaslight us into thinking that something was a certain thing or way or wording, and then they're saying, no, it's never been like that, you're wrong. Okay. And Fruit of the Loom was one that was proven to be a complete lie. But I think what's going on with the weather is the Mandela effect is created deliberately to eventually gaslight us. When this gets big enough and everybody says, where's the sun gone? I remember blue skies from April to September, which I do, being nearly 60. I grew up in the 70s, and it was wonderful. We had such long, beautiful summers. I don't remember clouds. There was occasional storms, and sometimes you'd see clouds come in, and so I think that's really what the Mandela effect is all about. It might not just be about the weather, but I think what they're doing is they're creating the situation whereby they could say, haha, you've got false memory. You're creating false memories. You're not right. You're remembering it wrongly. And then, of course, they will produce all these old postcards which have been doctored, bits of art which have been doctored, all the records online which have been doctored, which show clouds. Everything has got clouds. All right. Do you remember the old holiday brochures?
Yes.
So
you never
you
saw
go
a cloud.
through a holiday. You get
you
the
wouldn't want to
Thompson
go on
brochure,
holiday.
You get all that.
Exactly. You wouldn't want to go on holiday to a place, it was covered in clouds. The whole point is to get away from that.
No. And they would say, average temperature 26, hours of sunshine a day 14, and and it would just be sunny the whole time. And every single picture in that brochure would be blue, deep blue. Right? Look at one now. If you can still get a brochure, look at one now. Everything's cloudy. Every single holiday advertisement on television, on the internet, everything's cloudy. All right. So it has changed. It absolutely has changed. And it's a massive, long, protracted psyop. All right. Because one day they will go around and go, what sun? What are you talking about? There's never been a sun. We've never had sunshine. And again, to some people who are kind of new to this world, they'll just be like, what are you talking about? But if you sit them down and walk them through it very slowly, they might just get it.
But how then do they sell the concept of agricultural land being covered in panels after panels after panels of solar panels collecting non-existent sunlight?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the whole point, isn't it? So they're using solar power as a potential green energy, and it's not viable because there is no sun. Yeah. I wrote an article about that on my website that I think solar panels are only effective in 9 days a year or something. They're only operating to their full potential 9 days a year or something like that. Anyway, they're ridiculously inefficient. Now, excuse me. If we did have sun like we used to, we could have been surviving off solar power 20 years ago. It's not a new technology. It's just been underinvested. But now what they're trying to do is cover all the farmland. So I don't know, like farmers are basically, and again, it's not something I've researched heavily, but I have read that farmers are being offered massive subsidies not to farm. And one of the ways that they are doing this is to convince them to do solar power. However, like almost everything they do, it backfires. Okay, so uh, one of the ways I think we can get them is with legal action. And some people disagree, some people agree, but that's one of the simplest legal case is financial compensation. Okay, so if you have to prove loss of health, this, that, and the other, they're all complicated, and you need experts and all the rest of it. If you go into court and you just say, right, I invested £1 million and I was expecting to make 2 million, and I've made 500,000, so that's your fault. Okay, that's a relatively simple case. We have all the evidence to show that they're doing this. They've pretty much almost admitted it. So we can start attacking them. Yeah, I mean, sorry, I didn't want to digress into that. So, health. Can I get onto health sabotage then?
Yeah, please
Right.
do.
Right. What I wanted to do today, really, a brief introduction, was to try and make people understand that everything that we consume is harmful, and it's harmful because they have made it harmful. Okay, and I want to try and talk you through this. So this is a little bit deep, but I want people to go on online and look up something called the Secret Covenant, and if you type in inverted commas, an illusion so vast it will escape their perception. And the best place to read that, there's several sources of it, but the best place to read that is on Reddit because it's bullet pointed. Now, this is a really fascinating document because I read this first in 2013. Some guy from America sent it to me, and I was a bit like, oh my God, really? And I have to say, it took me a few years to really kind of accept it. Now, I'm not 100% that it's genuine, that it was written by somebody who's doing all this, but if it wasn't, then it's somebody who really, really understands the situation very, very deeply. And what that does, I'm not going to go into it now, but people could look it up. It underpins everything that I'm about to kind of describe, really, all the different ways that they're attacking us. So what's it all about? Okay, it seems to be, right, the crux of this seems to be creating illness. So the sea monster, or the six, what's it called?
Yeah.
The zodiac sign that's got the crab.
That's the one.
Yeah,
there we
the
go.
sea monster,
You can see that one.
Yeah.
The crab, as you say, the crab zodiac sign. Everybody will know that for people born between June the 21st and June the 23rd. The illness that's named after that. I think that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and the other one is neurodegenerative diseases. Okay, and the way they're doing this is by two ways. One, denial, and two, addition. So denial of things that are good for us and protective, and addition of things that are harmful. So additives and carcinogens and stuff like that. So that's the two ways they're doing it. Now, I'll rattle through this, but basically, like, no animal fats, no eggs, low salt, lots of processed seed oils, which are highly inflammatory, go vegan, no alcohol, no nicotine. But here's an interesting one as well, the proliferation of aluminium and other heavy metals. So an interesting example of that is, do you remember medicines used to come in tubs? And you'd have the little twisty, clicky top.
Oh, yeah.
I've still got some aspirin from, it must be like 15 years ago now. And I still got them, and they're still good. All right. They're the low dose 75 ml ones. They're still good. So now if you notice medicines, they come in plastic, but it's sealed with aluminium.
Yes.
Now,
It's got
when
a
you
foil.
punch one of those things out, the tablet is scraping against the aluminium. So you're going to get a residue of aluminium on that tablet. Now, if you're taking several tablets a day, how much aluminium are you getting? All right.
Yeah.
We know aluminium is coming down as well. Okay. So aluminium is also added to table salt. I think it's called stearate or something, and they call it a stabilizer or anti-caking agent. But like everything else, it's a lie. It's there because it's bad for you. All right. So this is what, again, it's a massive psyop. So there are other things as well, like Crocker. Don't buy anything from the country in the east that has the red flag, if you know what I mean. Run by somebody called Ping. Pretty much everything from there is toxic. So clothes, crockery, anything that touches your food and drink, don't. Because a few years ago they found heavy metals in the glaze on pottery. All right. Don't use aluminium pans, stuff like that. So anyway, where are we? So let's go on to beer. This is the most interesting for me because I love my beer. Even though I ran a wine business for 5 years, people used to laugh at me because I didn't drink wine when I went out. I was always like, no, I'll have a beer actually. So the alcohol industry is a really good example of how they are trying to completely manipulate the entire market. So what happens is this, Joe Bloggs starts a little craft beer business. Joe Bloggs is quite successful locally. Joe Bloggs becomes more successful in a wider area. And then the industry looks and says, right, we're going to have to buy Joe Bloggs because he's got really good beer. And we don't want them having good beer. Okay. So they buy them out. Now, there are loads of examples. I'll just rattle off a few. So Brixton Brewery, 2021 was bought by Heineken, and Bill Gates has just bought £1 billion share in Heineken for the record. So yeah, look at the Heineken portfolio. Meantime was bought by Sad Miller, 2015. Asahi Group acquired it in 2016. Anyway, Camden Brewery, AB InBev. Now, Camden Brewery was bought for £85 million. Okay, now economists were looking at this going, wow, because it was only small. It didn't have a huge market share. And immediately they ruined the beer. And this is actually really important for this point because this is the one that alerted me to what was going on. Because I used to drink Camden Lager and it was gorgeous. It was a lovely beer, really like rich and nice head. And I noticed it went flat, and I started arguing with the owner of the bar, and blah blah blah. Anyway, he nearly banned me because of this, and so I just had to drink somewhere else. But anyway, so I looked into it, and I found out it had been bought out, and I was like, oh, man, that's weird. And then I started thinking, actually, that makes complete sense. So I started looking into it. Brewdog. Now, Brewdog is an interesting one because they claim not to have been bought, but they did get a massive investment from, I think it was Heineken. There was a failed merger, but they got money from somewhere else, to be discussed. So there's a few examples of small breweries, but there's loads. The wine industry is similar, but they have a slightly different tactic. But also, hang on, where am I? Yeah, so independents, just for the record, Sam Smith's and Shepherd Neame. They are independent brewers, and they have wonderful pubs. So if you want to stay healthy, try and drink independent beers. Do your research. Go on Wikipedia. It's a really good source of information. If you're not sure and you get to the bar, type in the name of the brewery and it will say blah, 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 taken over in 2018 by big corporate, horrible people. Okay. And then not to drink it. Now, another way is just look at the barman. All right. When they swill the pint, when they're pouring it,
yeah,
that's a corporate beer. Any craft lager, you don't need to do that. You do the opposite. You try and pour it as carefully as you can, because otherwise you're going to end up with half a cup of foam. All right?
Yes.
Because corporate beers are flat. Now, I call it denatured. So what they're doing, they're buying all these breweries. Now, the less skeptical person could try and say, oh, no, it's just about cost saving. And, they buy it and then they cut corners and they change the process and the beer's not as good and blah, blah. It's not, because going back to Camden Brewery, loads of pubs in London delisted them. So the beer became horrible, just like all the other corporate rubbish. And loads of pubs delisted them. So their market share, already not that massive for £85 million, shrunk. That makes no economic sense at all. So why are they doing that? So the only benign explanation you can think of really is the fact that all the beers in their portfolio are horrid. So therefore, if they buy a really good beer that's becoming popular and make it horrid, nobody's going to notice that it's good.
Yes.
Right? It's the only possible thing. Now, but would they spend hundreds of millions of pounds doing this by buying and buying and buying and buying?
Yeah, why buy the beer in the first place?
It just doesn't make sense. So my feeling is that an attack on health, because let me roll out off some of the
Yeah,
benefits of
but
beer.
yes, I was going to say, because this is all leading up to, some people may say, but surely, drinking beer it's sugary and you shouldn't be drinking all of this kind of thing. But you you you're just looking for your bits. Yeah, go.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think it's time to make craft beer a protected term. It's similar to the Origine Controllata, the European DOC certification, which you get on wines and cheeses and hams and stuff like that. So it should have an absolute description. So you cannot call a beer craft, because this is what they're doing. They buy these craft breweries, and then they say, "Oh, craft beer," and it's not craft anymore. It's just corporate rubbish. But
Mm.
anyway, some of the benefit, obviously, the social benefits. It reduces stress, relaxes. It's we hang out with people, we talk, we discuss things, which is probably why they don't want us to be in pubs. Reduces inhibition, so social cohesion. Improved mental health with moderate consumption. Dilates arteries and reduces blood pressure. Alcohol inhibits the liver's production of new glucose, so it can keep your glucose down if you drink in moderation. Um, hops have anti-cancer properties. Polyphenols, antioxidants. B6 prevents the buildup of homocysteine. Sorry if I'm just reading these off a list, but I can't remember all this.
No.
Which prevents the buildup of homocysteine, which is linked to heart disease. Malted barley is rich in silicon, good for bone health, reduction of osteoporosis. Research suggests that beer, particularly darker beers, prevent cognitive degeneration, primarily by increasing the body's ability to remove aluminium.
So go out and get a stout, a
Yes.
craft stout,
Yeah.
or a porter.
So I'll just quickly run through it. Immune booster, magnesium, potassium, vitamin, minerals, antioxidants, polyphenols, anti-inflammatory, folic acid, B6, niacin, boost immunity. Hops and alcohol are both antibacterial. Beer contains phytochemicals which dissolve and prevent kidney stones from forming. Antioxidant properties reduce inflammation. Gut health, second brain, magnesium, potassium, a prebiotic, blah, blah, blah. So without getting too medical on you, you get the picture. All right?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that you I suppose you've kind of mentioned in a way, but not pointed it out, which I think is happening across the whole country and the whole world, is things are becoming bland. Food is bland. Beer, as you said, when they make it less good and it's flat, it's bland. And everything is we've got the uglification of the country with all the architecture, which is another story. But then food has been made so bland that when you taste something that actually has vitality and is delicious, you kind of notice it. And that's what you've described with craft beer.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why, I mean, I came up with a funny term. What was it? Hipsters inadvertently save the world. I don't know if I mentioned that on my last talk, but
No, this is a good one.
that
I'll have
kind
to
of
grow a beard.
yeah. So that kind of sums up the situation at the moment, which is, we're in a kind of a battle of knowledge. All right, because the health industry, and what I mean is the real health industry, not the pharmaceutical NHS. We're talking about people's awareness of good beer, good meat, butter, ghee, etc. You get the picture.
Yes.
We are that information is exploding. Nobody believes in vegetable oil and margarine and rubbish like that anymore. Very few people are still in that kind of mindset. And this all started with TV chefs to some extent, but mostly hipsters. Mostly people who wanted to buy a steak that's made from a cow that's in a field miles away and tended by a one-legged man with a monocle and a bloody walking stick or something. The
Nice.
the more obscure it is, and a cheese that's made on top of a mountain by a blind woman. The more
Yeah.
obscure it is, the more they want it. And as funny as that is, what it's done is it's made people really think about what they're eating. Okay.
Yes.
And they might occasionally get a bit of cheddar from the supermarket, but most clued up people now, they're going to their local cheese shop, or they're going to the local health food store, or Infinity Foods, or whatever your local is. The problem is there's not enough of these around for some people. I'm very fortunate, and I guess you are as well, that we live in places where that sort of stuff is available. But Yeah, so that was, that was kind of the whole hipster thing. So we're in a kind of information battle, really, and the powers that be are trying desperately to, one, undermine all that information. So there are lots of, not lots, but I've seen quite a few health advisors out there who are arguing against it, certain aspects of it, and what they're trying to do is confuse and undermine. Um, but
And
all the time there's loads of people out there going, stop eating that. Go on.
yes. Well, I was just going to say that, I mean, when you were talking about the health things, so much of stuff has been so ingrained in people. We've been told, like, one minute we were told red wine is bad for you. The next minute we're told, actually, no, it's good for you. We're told alcohol is bad for you. We're told nicotine is bad for you. We're told the fats and all that. So we have a very confused picture. And then when you say, as I said on the show, when I discovered that nicotine actually was very beneficial for you and not addictive as they say it is, and even those people who are open-minded to all the nonsense and sent me down the rabbit holes will say, "Oh, but Richard, no, 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 no." Nicotine, no, that's it. And some of these tropes are so hard to remove from people, even
Yes.
those who are open-minded.
Right. Nicotine is a really good example, actually. So I'll jump straight to that. Now, what they did, this is the process. So they look at something and they go, oh my God, that's really good for them. We can't allow that. So what they do is they buy all the producers. Now, in nicotine, they've done that 100%. They can't do that with the beer industry because it's really easy to create a craft brewery, a small microbrewery. They can't do that with the wine industry because there's thousands of wine producers everywhere. So the only way they could do it is by limiting the supermarket wine, what's available. So you can't get really good wines in supermarkets. Waitrose do a couple, but other than that, it's just rubbish, denatured rubbish. So nicotine, excuse me, they've managed to completely control the market for decades. So what they do is they make the product bad for you. And this achieves two things. One, they can try and stop you doing it when they want to. Two, they can poison you with this and tell you it's bad for you. Now, for many, many years, they used nicotine as a really good way to cripple our health, to give us cancer, to give us emphysema, and all the other hideous things it does to you. Natural, pure, naturally produced nicotine, and that includes tobacco, is not harmful and it's not addictive. So what they use to make it addictive is certain flavorings as well, but pyrosines. Okay, so it goes even deeper than that with nicotine. So what they're doing is they wash out the natural nicotine from the tobacco. So if you go and buy a cheap cigar and you smoke it, it burns quite quickly. It's very dry, and you get this very intense hit like a cigarette. Okay, that's not what a cigar should do. Whereas if you go up the scale and you buy more expensive cigars, you actually get a true nicotine smoke. So that it's not washed tobacco, I call it. Now, quite what they're putting back in place of the natural tobacco, I don't know. I don't have a laboratory, so I can't tell. But that is definitely going on. And some of the tobacco things, they actually say that the nicotine is washed and then reintroduced. Why would they do that?
Why? Yeah,
All right.
exactly.
But pyrosines are the things that are making it addictive. And I think it was in America, there were several big tobacco companies went into court, and under oath, they all stated that nicotine was not addictive. And this is obviously twisted by all the shills, say, yeah, and they just said that because they were lying and all the rest of it to protect their market. No, they said that because they had to, because they're under oath. And if they lied, they'd be in prison. All right, because that is the truth. But they do make them addictive in other ways, by the way they burn it, by drying the tobacco, and it burns all the rest of it. So, but nicotine is incredibly good for us. Now, very tiny technology, nano. There's a very good group called La Quinta Columna, who are a Spanish group of scientists, and they've been looking into some of the very tiny technology that's, in those things. And they've found very recently that nicotine destroys the nano things. Okay, so this, and again, why are they so desperate to ban nicotine? because it's not
And
naturally harmful. Why have they made it so harmful? So that they can ban it. But why do they want to ban it? Because they know that they can't get us all under control as long as we're still smoking or vaping.
and we do remember quite famously at the beginning of the event in 2020, when this airborne thing that we were all going to be breathing in, that Dr. Fauci famously said, now's a good time to give up smoking.
Yeah, yeah.
And it turns out the people who actually were smoking were that fewer of those ended up in the hospitals. Curious little fact.
Okay, there was one paper published by, I can't remember where the doctor was, I think it was America, and he was on a COVID ward, and I think they were all smokers or something like that. And what was happening? None of them were allowed to smoke, and then several of them died. And he had a light bulb moment, and he gave them all patches, so they had nicotine. All of them cured within days. All of them. So that, and almost nobody who smoked got COVID. So again, what's
something going on there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something must be going on there.
So yeah, and then salt is another example, isn't it? We all know salt is very good for you. So when you look at the real science, we should be consuming 6 to 8 or 9 grams, depending on body weight and lifestyle. So obviously, if you're really active and you're sweating a lot, you're going to sweat a lot of salt out. So I remember my dad was in the army in Malaya many moons ago, and he was always going on about salt tablets. So
yes.
when they're in really hot, sticky climates, they would have to take salt tablets, because if they didn't, they would get really sick, because low salt is actually really bad for you. And the more salt you have, there's a study that proved quite recently, I think it was about 500,000 people, the more salt you consumed, the lower your blood pressure.
Interesting. I mean, just on an animal thing, animals, cows, are given salt licks. They're great big things, and when animals know instinctively the things that will be good for them, what plants to eat when they're feeling a bit, dodgy or what have you, and they will go when they need salt and lick, as long as it's available, they will get it, because in a farming environment, they are obviously trapped. They can't just wander off and go, I'm going to go down to the seaside and have a little bit of a lick down there. So farmers know that, and it clearly follows, really, in my book, that we humans also need the salt. And the more that they tell us we don't, the more you realise that's got to be the reverse.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, without salt, we would stop functioning. All our electrical systems are based. They need salt to operate. I don't know the deep science behind that, but you can look it up. There's lots of stuff that describes
but
it.
Not table salt.
No,
just to reiterate, not table salt.
Yeah. So there's a lovely lady, Dr. Barbara O'Neill, who I believe you met. So she recommends Celtic salt. That's the only thing that I've heard her say that I disagree with. I have to say, she's a wonderful, clever woman, and very worth following. I don't trust anything from the sea. Okay, and it's to do with microplastics and toxins. So the microplastics that are everywhere, they have an affinity for environmental toxins. So if they come into contact with any environmental toxins, they will absorb them into the plastic. Then they get eaten by a fish. Then you eat the fish, or you eat the sea salt. You take in the plastics. You're also taking in all the toxins. Okay, so you get the harm from the actual plastic, which is some form of polymer, and you also get all the toxins that it's absorbed from the sea. I wouldn't trust anything from the sea. I occasionally, very occasionally, have a bit of seafood, but other than that, I don't touch anything from the sea. So I would stick to basic rock salt or pink Himalayan, but just make sure the pink Himalayan isn't from the country with the red flag run by somebody called Ping, because again, they're tainted with heavy metals. I've not seen the science. I've heard that, so it's hearsay. Well, that's all I can say. But be on the safe side. Check the country of origin. Oh, and by the way, they've got a bit sneaky, like they do with loads of things. So quite often, when something is made in that country with the red flag, it's not the name of the country anymore. It says produced in, and it's got 3 letters. So just be aware of that. Um, da, 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 da. Yeah, I've done all that. Done all that. Low salt is very dangerous. Done all that. Where should we go? Um,
Where would you like to go?
I don't know. Let's have a look. We've done alcohol. Let's have a look.
So, I mean, just to go back on the alcohol thing,
Yes.
alcohol, we said before we started recording, you know, a lot of people saying, oh, well, alcohol is bad. And we know, I mean, my mother was an alcoholic and was very abusive as an alcoholic. But that's an extreme. Like all things, you can drown by having too much water, of course. So things in moderation. But we're always sort of led to believe that alcohol in and of itself is a bad thing.
No, it's not. It's incredibly healthy. Some of the things I listed earlier, but you know, red wine particularly, red wine improves heart health. But again, we go back to this principle of you have to source the good stuff, and the good
Yes.
stuff is hard to find. And this is how they do it. So they put all sorts of horrible things in cheap wine, all right, and it causes physical and mental issues. So if you drink lots of cheap alcohol, you'll get depressed, you'll get anxiety, you'll probably get liver damage and stuff like that. That's not the alcohol. Even
Mm.
hangovers, alcohol doesn't cause a severe hangover. Okay, so if you drink organic or particularly biodynamic wine and you have a bit of a heavy night, I'm not going to start talking about quantities, but we all understand.
Mm.
You don't wake up with that horrendous nausea, shaking, anxiety, what we call a real terrible hangover. Doesn't happen. All
What
right.
about spirits?
Spirits. I mean, I'm not a big spirit drinker. My experience is spirits are not as bad. It tends to be mainly cheap beer and cheap wine. Um,
I mean, I'm thinking in terms of things that have been distilled, because once you've distilled it, you may have got rid of some of the stuff that was in the water that might be in. You know, I'm just thinking beer, even craft beer, may be using water with fluoride or other substances in it.
oh, absolutely, yeah. So there are some breweries that demineralize the water. So they may or may not get rid of the fluoride. But yeah, that's a very interesting point, actually. I'm glad you mentioned that. So when you drink beer, you are consuming essentially tap water. So you are getting fluoride. Can I mention one thing I discovered recently was oh God, what's it called? Oh, can I just go
Whilst,
and get it? Do you
yeah,
mind?
no,
Hang
yeah, yeah, you do that,
on.
because whilst you're saying that, what we clearly need then is breweries, these craft breweries, to understand that they could filter the water and use things like I mean, it would take a long time, I guess, but on a larger scale, to reverse osmosis the water to begin with. Although, of course, there are certain beers I know, because I used to read a lot about beer, that source a particular type of water because of its flavour, because all of the ingredients in beer, the hops, the barley, or the malt, and the what do they call it, the liquor, which is the water, all add a different flavour to the craft beer. He's back.
Absolutely, yeah. And there are breweries that use spring water as well.
Yes. So the
Do you
more
remember?
awake breweries, I mean, that's what I'm saying. We need the awake breweries to the small craft, and they're more likely to be awake because they'll know that things like tap water, which tastes disgusting when you've filtered it or you've using distilled or reverse osmosis, and you put a tiny bit of salt in it, tastes so much softer and more delicious than the crap that comes out of the tap.
Yeah, I did see recently, I can't remember the brand, but there was a central London based craft brewer, microbrewery that was basically filtering their water. But Korev is a Cornish beer that uses spring water. There's a few Bavarian beers. I'm not sure if Bavaria has to use spring water, but there's a German beer that uses spring water as well. And Hofmeister has just come back. Do you remember Hofmeister, Follow the
Oh,
Bear?
follow the bear. Yes.
Yeah, they're now a super, super delicious high-end craft beer. Whereas
And
one,
are they're not bought out by a big.
no, 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 no. No, I met the rep down in Brighton. He was in the pub and I got chatting to him, and he said, no, basically what this guy did, and it's a very bizarre concept, really, is he bought the brand because it just wasn't, it didn't really exist anymore. and he revived it. But they've made the most beautiful beer you'll ever taste. It's wonderful. It's won a couple of prizes, I think, like
Right.
European prizes. So that's worth looking into. But going back to the fluoride thing, yes,
Yes.
unfortunately, even craft beer, a lot of them, they will have fluoride in. So it's a kind of a trade-off. But guess what gets rid of fluoride from the body?
Oh,
Tamarind. All right.
tamarind.
And this is a source of tamarind. Or you can, if you've got interesting shops near you, like proper health food shops or international groceries, you know, these kind of international groceries, and they've got all these exotic things from all over the world. You can buy tamarind in a block. It's very cheap, and you just have a little nibble every day. Now, do they know that? I don't know. But now we know it, and if it is true, I mean, then maybe a little bit more research and fact checking on this, but it might be handy. But if it,
Tamarin. How are you spelling that?
Tamarind. It's a
Tamarind.
kind of it's a fruit.
Ah.
I'll show you the packet.
So I mean, that's interesting because although they have all these things which they do to poison everybody, but there is the antidote, as it were, like we've seen with nicotine and alcohol and tamarind. Oh, here we go.
There you go.
Tamarind. Well,
So
there we are.
it's
So
kind of
looking,
is it a fruit or a root or a vegetable? I'm not really sure, but it's quite sweet and tangy when you eat it. But
but Leon Perrins
apparently,
is a sauce, so you could stick a bit of that in your beer,
and it's in that.
and
But
you'll
guess
be all right.
but guess what? What does this have? It has the royal seal.
Ah,
Yeah. So they're drinking it. So do they know this? Have they always known this?
mm.
Possibility. Um, yeah. So what can we talk about? How long have we got
Creams.
left, Rick?
Well, the cosmetics and things you put
Oh
on
my
your
God,
body.
I didn't even go there, did I? Sorry.
No,
So
because
sorry.
that's something. I mean, you remember in the past, every time you used to go out, when there was that orange globe thing that used to come out in the summer, and people would sit on the beach and lie on it. We were always told to slap stuff on our skin to protect us from that light. Now, Julia, my lovely partner, grew up in Saudi Arabia as a child. Now, the sun over there is very hot, but no, at any time were they encouraged to put, this is going back, what is she now, 43 or something. So 40 years ago, they weren't encouraged to put sun creams on them in Saudi Arabia. But come over to here where we're at a different line on the equator and it's not as hot. Everyone is like, no, you better slap that on, slap it on. And she encouraged her dad to do that on his face. And guess what? He had that thing that's the zodiac sign, that's the crab, on his nose and had to go and get that looked at. And we put one and two together and thought it might be something in the cream.
Oh no, 100%. Yeah. So I remember looking. I don't have them to hand, but I remember looking at the graph of the rise of the use of sun cream and the rise of skin cancer. It causes the skin cancer, but it's worse than that. It deprives you of all your UV, all the benefits from UV. I I spent all my summers as a child. Literally every summer for 6 weeks, I would be on a beach in Italy, and it was I used to come back brown and get called all sorts of funny names. I mean, literally like dark brown.
Mm,
And I never wore sun cream ever, not even once.
no.
Nobody did in the 70s. In the 80s it started becoming a thing. But there's an interesting point is there's a Russian study that says that there are chemicals in most, I can't remember if it was all, so I'll say most, sun creams that when you're in chlorinated water, it produces a carcinogen. Now, my feeling is it probably has a carcinogen in it anyway, but that was a really interesting study. It's a Russian study. I never found it again. So I don't know if you noticed this, but it's getting really difficult to find stuff on the internet now. So I've read loads of interesting things over the years, and when I go and look for them to produce it as a reference, I can't get them.
Yeah, it's almost as if they're being removed. Why would anyone do that?
Yeah. Oh, I can't imagine. I can't
Can't
imagine.
imagine that
For
anyone
instance,
would.
the two, let's not go to 5G now, but I've got two studies which reveal some really interesting things about 5G, which I know is a big thing with you. So maybe we can do that another time. But
Mm.
yeah, if I can find them. So should we talk about cosmetics? So
Yes,
pretty
do.
much everything in Boots, Superdrugs, Tesco, Asda, Sainsbury's I won't use bad words, as you say, to protect your stuff like that. But let's look at. Do you remember I was going on about what they do is they buy a company and then they make the products not very nice, should we
Yes.
say? Yeah.
Yes, I think
So
that's safe.
Body Shop, all right. Body Shop bought L'Oreal in 2006. All right. All this stuff is now not very nice, should
I
we
think
say?
it's the other way around, wasn't it? L'Oreal bought Body Shop.
Sorry. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah,
That's what I
because
meant. Yeah, sorry.
It's quite local to me. Anita Roddick set it
Yeah.
up as a very wholesome sort of thing, but then
Yeah.
got bought out, as you say.
Now, I can't say for definite because I wasn't aware of all this when Body Shop was bought out. But I do know that Aveda was bought by Estee Lauder in 1997, and this is what alerted me to that this same process with the beer was happening with cosmetics. So I was using Aveda because I'm allergic to all these nasty chemicals, and I suddenly noticed a little bit of allergy. I was like, oh, that's a bit weird, isn't it? I thought this was natural. Second bottle I bought, and they were really sneaky because they introduced it quite slowly over months rather than like the beer where they just ruin
Slapping
it
it in.
immediately. And I looked it up. Sure enough, Estee Lauder had bought it. Jo Malone. This is a really interesting one. So Jo Malone started her shop in Kensington or somewhere like that. Anyway, I can't remember. Within a month, somebody had come in, and this is documented. So this is from her own words. So she was on Radio 4 and she did an interview where she revealed all this, and it's fascinating stuff. She was offered £1 million for her shop, and she refused. And whoever offered those £1 million was clearly a little bit upset because a while later, I don't remember the time span to be honest, but I'm sure you could look it up. She got cancer.
Poor woman.
Interesting.
Yes.
All right. Now, what happens then? Estee Lauder comes along and says, "Hey, Joe, don't worry. We can cure you. We could fly you to New York and cure your cancer. But we want your company. I'll let you fill in the gaps." All right. Eco was bought by a big corporate in 2017, and Eco was a wonderful product, that I could use and didn't cause me any harm. It was bought and then it wasn't so nice, should we say? Okay. But what they did, they released a new version, Eco Zero, and it was fragrance free, they described it as. But guess what? It was double the price. How interesting. Why would they do that? All right. So there's all sorts of shenanigans going on. Even like, okay, so this takes it down to like even smaller levels. So razor lubrication strips, really nasty chemicals in there. Now, we talk about ways that they can avoid it. So the most expensive blades you can buy, disposable blades, are Hydro 5. All right. The Hydro 3 has got a fixed strip. You can't get it off. Hydro 5, you can take it off. Just click it back or take it off. So they're shaving with Hydro 5, and all the people who can't afford Hydro 5 are shaving with these other ones, and they're getting all these chemicals, really nasty chemicals in the strip. So just be aware of that.
A double-edged razor, I would thoroughly recommend. It's just the old-fashioned
One of the
blade.
old ones with the proper razor blade in it.
Yeah, you put the razor blade in. I shave all the way around, and I've learnt now not to nick myself too many times.
That's proper retro, isn't it?
Well, it is, but it's doing it old school.
Proper...
And okay, but also, I mean,
have you got the brush as well?
Got the brush, and a little bit of soap and what have you, and or oil. You can use oil, and you shave away. But the great thing is you're not using some of this plastic, so you're not buying up lots of plastic because it's a metal thing with perhaps a wooden handle, and the blades, and the blades just go, like 100 blades for like £6, and so that's like 6 months of the year for me.
Wow.
For next to that, and for about 15-20 quid, the actual thing. So any blokes there shaving, go back to the old-fashioned way. You're not putting any chemicals on, and just be careful what soap you're using, of course. But other than that, you're not putting more microplastics into the sea. That's my 10 pence worth.
Oh, I don't have to go into the microplastics, but actually, yeah, I'll just touch on it briefly. So
We've
this
got about 5
idea.
minutes.
Okay, so this idea that microplastics are coming from, synthetic jumpers and plastic bottles that are deteriorating or decomposing is nonsense.
Is it?
I touched on this, and when we first met at the AV event, I touched on this. But like, who's got a synthetic jumper anymore? No, they're like, they're from the 70s. Plastic bottles cannot deteriorate into very finely formed hollow plastic tubes. It's impossible, and they're a different type of plastic anyway. So these microfibers are coming from somewhere else, basically from up there. They're every single day.
Right.
They're released.
Oh, okay. So that's
And
another.
that is why they are. I didn't really want to go into that, but
No, no.
that is why they are ubiquitous. So they are everywhere, from the top of Mount Everest to the deepest sea sediments, because they've been doing this for decades. All right. So understand that microplastics are not from plastic things that we use. That's a cover.
So you can use your cheap razor blades if you don't have that horrible chemical thing in, but I would still say double-edged razors.
That's
good.
Brilliant. I've got a lovely image of you doing that, actually.
Yeah.
It's quite funny. Yeah.
I've actually got a video from the past where I do it for the first time, but it was like 4 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, anyway. I mean, I think rather than dive into another different example of this, I was going to go more into the sea monster thing, but let's leave that for another time. I think really just to kind of
wind this up,
conclude really is to say to people this, like, and I'm not the only person saying this. This is all over TikTok and Facebook and YouTube, and loads of people are saying this, and they're going into supermarkets and saying, look at the ingredients of this, that, and the other. Think, because almost everything you buy in the mainstream shops is not very nice, shall we say. Okay.
Yes.
Read the ingredients firstly, research the ingredients so you start to recognize the things that you shouldn't be having. Try and find channels that expose these things. There's some really good ones around at the moment, some really, really good information out there. But also, when you buy a wine, or no, actually not a wine, get your wine from an organic shop firstly. But when you buy a beer, look it up on Wikipedia, just to make that point again.
Right. On Wikipedia, of all places?
Yeah, because they can't lie.
What, Wikipedia?
Well, all right, let's put it this way. They can't, if you're describing the commercial history of a company, you can't really give false information, because you would be found out very, very easily. Now they do hide a lot of what they call conspiracy theories. Oh, this is just this and this is just that, but they can't blatantly lie about demonstrable facts.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
If a company gets taken over, they can't not say that. Do you understand my point?
No. It's just that I know that people will immediately go, "Oh, Wikipedia! Oh my God, you're relying on that."
No, but yeah, I totally agree. They are part of the establishment, and they try and hide all sorts of stuff. So I'm not defending them by any chance, by any means. But they are a really good source if you want to check the corporate history, the company status of pretty much any small company. Not every single brewery is on there, but lots of them are. So you just look it up, and it will tell you if it's still independent, who it's owned by, if it was taken over, who it was taken over by, and when. And if a brewery's been bought out, don't do it. And here's another quick example to finish up on. Bragg's apple cider vinegar. This is a really interesting example, right? Because it takes us full circle to the whole globalism thing. Bragg's was a wonderful, wonderful apple cider vinegar, all sorts of health benefits. It was bought out by a female pop star, should we say, whose first name is Katie. And she is now working with a rather famous man who tried to convince us to do that, called Bill. Okay, now she's not getting her apples anymore from the original organic source.
Is that like Cow and Gate coming in there?
What?
Sorry, it's a very bad joke. With these two individuals, one might be a cow, one might be a gate.
You could say that. No, Kate. I don't know where the cow bit comes in.
Well, I don't know whether she is
her surname is a type of cider.
I was going to say yes. No, yes.
Yeah.
I know. I didn't know. I don't know where she's. Some people. Anyway, I don't know.
So
I stopped you there with a bad joke, but carry on.
No, it's fine. It's fine. We're almost.
So Bragg's was bought out by.
Bragg's was bought by this lady, Katie.
Yeah. Katie Thingy.
Cider. and she's now working with old Billy Bob, that
Yeah.
Bill of the Needles, and he is supplying her with apples. And although they are still certified organic, what they've done in America is they've got round this problem, and he's created a thing called apeel, which is as sinister as the bovir, which you've talked about, which we don't have time to go into. But apeel is a chemical um, coating which they put on apples, which has got all sorts of hideous stuff in it. Just research it. So they've denatured the vinegar, and they're using these apples with these hot toxic coatings. So again, perfect example of, oh look, loads of people are using this really interesting stuff, and that's supposed to be just for us, so we can't let them have that. So let's change it and make it bad for them. Now, in this instance, they don't want to get rid of it, so they're not telling us. They just did it secretly. But loads of people noticed immediately, and they were like, "It's not the same. It's not the same." And a little bit of that on the internet, and that's where we are. They found out that it had been taken over, and Billy Bob's involved, and anything he's involved in, you need to run a mile. You really do.
Absolutely.
But anyway, just a final word. Really, just think, okay? Because it's very difficult to. It's not difficult, time consuming, and you need not be lazy. You can't be lazy anymore. Don't accept anything at face value. Always do your research, because there's so many things. It's just
I mean, I suppose, for those who are hard of thinking and time.
I love that phrase.
Yeah. And seems to be a lot out there. I mean, one of the basic things that you could do is avoid supermarkets, because they are a purveyor of things that look nice but might not be that beneficial.
I would agree, except with your comment about Waitrose is just as bad as the others. Now, I'm not saying everything in Waitrose is good, but they do have a policy of 0 GM, even ingredients. Okay, so that's a good thing. You can get lots of independent and raw cheeses, so that's a good thing. You can get gluten-free organic pasta, so that's a good thing. So if you know what you're looking for, and again, this is about reading up, this is about learning and finding out. But if you know what you want and what's good for you, it's definitely the place to go. I couldn't live anywhere without a Waitrose. I know that sounds horrifically middle class, and I don't really mean it like that.
Well, I suppose what I'm sort of getting at is if you struggling with the products, the more that you get to know your local producer, who you can talk to about, who you can talk to about what they're doing and what goes into it, and they're friendly enough to explain, or even take you round to say, this is where we grow such and such. This is because local producers at the moment, I think, want to give the authenticity of their product more than any other time, because they're dealing with the mass warfare that we've been talking about, which food, creams, things you smoke, things you ingest, all of that, and the authenticity of the product is the most important thing.
100%, yeah, and I completely agree with you on that. And your comment, or your sort of commentary on Bovir is a really good example of that. So whether you think it's a psyop or not is by the by. What it's done is it's raised a massive amount of awareness about the fact that what I'm saying is actually going on. Okay, because he's got involved. Old Billy Bob has got involved and introduced something that is quite clearly not good into animal feed. And what I've seen online is this massive explosion of like, we're not using it, don't worry, we're not going to do it, blah blah blah. And as you said, there might be a problem with over stretching the facilities of all these little producers, but it's making people think, and it's making them understand, and that is the beginning of what I call the silent revolution. And that's what's going on at the moment. And I registered that thing, that domain years ago, and I never got it together. But I really should have, and maybe I should do it now, because that's really where we are. This is the silent revolution. We're starting to understand, and we're starting to fight back. We don't need bullets. We just, I ran a wine business very quickly. Last comment. For about 5 or 6 years, and on my business card, the tagline was, the ability to change the world lies very simply in how we spend our money. All right. And I think that's the perfect conclusion to this talk, really, because it's exactly how we change the world.
There you go, Ian Simpson. Thank you so much for coming on and making us aware and alert and thinking. And that's really all I try to do with all the bits and pieces and all the guests I have on, is to, you know, not say this is a fact, you go and do the work yourself and think it, but to be just to think. Because we've given away so much of our power, and we automatically assume that everything is going to be all right. But perhaps in these day and ages, this day and age, we need to be a little bit more thinking about the things we ingest or put on our bodies. Ian, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming back. We did record this a month or so ago, but it's and we'll bring you back on for more of some of the deep dives that you've done. So there we are, ladies and gentlemen.
I've got loads, but yeah,
absolutely. And I know you are any events that you need to quickly plug.
No, I don't know. I've been terribly out of the loop because I've got so much other stuff going on. So I'm always up for talking. So I might be invited to a couple of things in a few months, but right now there's nothing on the calendar. But you know, if anyone wants to talk to me and invite me to something, I'd be more than happy to talk, because you know, especially about my specialist subject, but also about all this other stuff, because I have a lot of information, and for me to get it all out on your channel will take a year.
Exactly. There you go. So if you need a speaker or you want to invite Ian on your show, get in touch with me and I'll pass you on to Ian. So thank you so much for watching, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks, Richard.
I'll be back with more monologues and more wonderful guests. Until then, from us, sorry it's been just over an hour. Till next time, goodbye.